made it, which feels kind of like a miracle. And you all made it, and I feel super honored to be here with you. This is, am I making this up? The revolutionary power of self and selves-acceptance in healing and liberation. Possible content triggers include references to a traumatic childhood, problematic amnesia and switching, oppressive dominant culture, and some glitchy video editing. I offer suggestions for skipping in a bit, and I urge you to treat yourselves with care and compassion. As a visual reference, on screen is mainly me talking, a light-skinned, youthful, middle-aged, woman-looking person with shoulder-length, dark and pink hair and glasses. We are Iridescent Birdie, or just Birdie, a traumagenic DID system in plural. This graphic of a brilliant rainbow bird stands for our name, which comes from a powerful dream that we had many years ago. We're obsessed with our beautiful white cat and fur baby, Florabelle, so here's some shameless, cute pics of her. We have a small practice doing and teaching sigh of relief energy medicine. Tiny really, but awesome. We're working on writing a book called Stuffed Animal Alchemy, and we've been doing pro bono help and advocacy for and with people with disabilities for years. We love kayaking, so here's a pic of sun sparkles on the water, which we call water diamonds. And another favorite pic of the lake, which shows a large expanse of water, the shallow end in front, way out to a far horizon. I love how at a distance it looks opaque like a solid surface, but then if you get close enough you can see through the surface to all these beautiful mysterious rocks, and they look so intriguing. Okay, someone else is in the house. Woo! Because we went and watched some of the footage and we're like, it seemed a little bit boring, and some other folks came in front. It's good timing because we really want to welcome and appreciate each and all of you for being here. Words before all others. Here's some more of my best pics of trees, water, a deer, and views from my area, the Finger Lakes of New York State in the US, which is traditionally and legally Haudenosaunee land, who the Europeans called the Iroquois, who gave the whole concept of checks and balances of power directly to the writers of the US Constitution, except that the Haudenosaunee Supreme Court are the female elders. In an acknowledgement of the Haudenosaunee peace-building tradition of words before all others, I offer greetings and thanks to the earth, sky, sun, and moon, to the winds, the water being, the finned ones, winged ones, creepy crawlies, four-leggeds, two-leggeds, and plant people. For those who wish, I offer support for grounding, down and up through the feet, to and from the stars, inward toward ourselves, and outward toward each other's, and or supportive friends, fam, energies, or spirits. About words and terms. We are a proud word nerd. Many of us, our current take on a lot of the terms that we're using, interested, ambivalent, influx. We use I and we at various times according to context or who's fronting. We identify with DID, dissociative identity disorder, because it is very useful in a lot of ways for describing something that for us is very real and impactful. We do have a lot of OSDD type experiences. We like adaptive plurality, and that's something we're kind of aiming aiming for system is really useful because we definitely are a system. But it's a little mechanistic, so we kind of like ecosystem better, but we use system a lot. We also use parts to talk about some of our parts that pop up or influence or that we're thinking about or talking about, especially because we are probably a polyfragmented system and because we don't know our system very well. When we know them better, we tend to call them people or peeps. We often say our parts and peeps. That's just us, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about words, so I hope that we will keep talking about it. I was very jazzed about the theme of the conference, We Are the Revolution, and I felt inspired when a friend who had told me a bunch of their experiences as a system was saying, sometimes I feel like I'm making it all up. The next day on a Discord server, it was a huge topic of conversation, and someone I know was also telling me they work with people who might have their entire system all mapped out, and then they're still going, am I making this all up?
Of course not, but let's look at all the reasons why we might feel that way. We're not here to diagnose anyone or go over proof of the DID brain as shown in functional MRI scans. We're here to champion self and selves-acceptance.
And actually, making stuff up might be getting a bad name. I talk about the ways that I rely on intuition and discovery and imagination in my own healing work. We hope this talk can be useful as well as hopefully kind of fun and entertaining in parts for relatively newly aware systems as well as anyone interested in healing or liberation or revolution.
General references to traumatic childhood and oppressive dominant culture ahead, or skip about 12 minutes to We Exist affirmations. To also skip video making challenges and triumphs, skip about 19 minutes to You May Be Plural If and Stuffed Animal Alchemy. Also nice for kiddos and littles, Alchemy of Safety, about 17 minutes from the end.
Spacing out there. We know we use dissociation from the beginning to survive and manage life, and have been ever since. At the same time, we didn't know that we were plural or that there was such a thing as plural or not plural.
System discovery, or discovery. Last February, someone we trust said, paraphrasing, "It's interesting. Your background is like a recipe for OSDD or DID." So we went home and looked it up.
Started learning about it, and I didn't get very far before I was like, I have this. I definitely have this. I looked at my life and I just thought, I don't remember it. I have a narrative and a timeline. It's kind of like a resume, and I can tell some stories, but I don't feel like I was there. I just came to feel that different parts and peeps of my system had been in front and running different periods of my life. It's kind of like a patchwork quilt or a weaving, like a table runner, and each section is completely different with a different design and different colors. And there are some threads that go through the whole thing, but the ones that are weaving back and forth and making the design are different, and that pattern is changing at different times. Realizing that I am a system of parts and peeps that are working together, or trying to, doing the best they can. Even though I was like, who am I? I definitely felt a sigh of relief. I just knew that it was true.
Why do we tend to doubt ourselves? Here's 10 reasons that I thought of.
Plural invisibility. For newly aware systems that are of my body age or older, it can be hard sometimes to understand how we could not know for so long, since I already was a system, but I didn't realize it. There was no awareness and no language for that. I had no way to understand my experiences or to know how they might be different from others. I've been around a lot of talks and books and information about trauma healing, and still nada. We learn not to trust our own perceptions. My entire childhood, where there was so much going on, I was taught to act like nothing was going on. Having been very premature, I spent a month in the hospital, and then I had 2 weeks at home with my mom, who had no maternity leave. I knew that my home life had troubles, but I finally realized that perhaps my most significant caretakers was the babysitters, which was an at-home daycare that I went to almost from when I was born to about age 6 or 7. Although I have almost total amnesia, I know from symptoms, recurring dreams, facts, and the few wisps of memory that I do have that it was a terrible, terrible place. And that was not acknowledged. I learned not to trust many of my own perceptions, that it's normal for adults to act absolutely insanely. Negative experiences of truth-telling. Of course, some part of me and my system had a grip on the truth and what was real and what made sense, or at least what didn't make sense. But living in pretense and staying silent was so ingrained in me from such an early age that I rarely tried to tell the truth. But when I did, it did not go well. Having had to be someone or something other than ourselves, we were pathologically self-sufficient and pretended that we had no needs. The perfect child with nothing wrong, which could not possibly be further from the truth. And of course, intuitively masking in order to get by and to act like what I thought I was supposed to act like. So many of us spend so much time masking and pretending not to be plural. No wonder it's hard to believe ourselves when we are trying to get to know and support our whole system. Dismissal of children's experiences. Humanity is just really hurting. I'm just gonna come right out and say it. And particularly the experiences of children are downplayed and dismissed all the time. When I had an unexplained knee injury at about 4 years old and had massive swelling and had to wear a cast and be carried around because I was too little for crutches, no one seemed to be able to wrap their minds around how I could have gotten hurt. Even the local doctor said it was childhood arthritis, which is just a name for a child whose knee is swollen. Experiences of other groups are also dismissed. And obviously this happens to a lot of groups, not just plurals, when your lived experience is denied and not validated by the culture. That is what is crazy making. Women and people raised as girls experiences are routinely dismissed, especially around our bodies and our competence. Men and people raised as boys are allowed to do things a lot, but often their basic needs, emotional, physical, social, are totally denied. The experiences of Black and Indigenous folks and other people of color obviously have been and are ignored all over the place, and often just a different way of being or coming at things is written off if it doesn't match the dominant culture's assumptions and ways of doing things. People with disabilities are often not considered full human beings or listened to for expertise. And when any of these groups question these oppressive assumptions, very often are labeled as crazy and literally insane. It's almost like the whole society seems dissociated from reality to me. Amnesia. I felt so lost, and I felt like I don't know my system at all, and it felt very embarrassing. I'm like, how could I not know all kinds of things that not only do I not remember my life, I don't know what's going on in my own body and mind. Poor practices in the mental health industry. Now, I believe in the work of good mental health practitioners and other healing practitioners. We're a healing practitioner, but there's also so much that is wrong in the mental health industry, starting with Freud on up. Maybe that's for another talk. We wanted to just call this part Bad Therapists. We probably tried out 7 or 8 or 9 therapists, and none of them mentioned dissociation. It's not funny, but you could make like a funny sort of bad dates montage of the different things that were not cool, not helpful. One therapist was so upset over a few sentences of my story, I had to remind her that I survived. One totally condescending to me as a young person, me just feeling that I'm either entertaining or educating them. Another was so impressed / intimidated by my social justice work that she just seemed to want to be my best friend. One just wanted to teach meditation. One, I begged over and over, can we please make a plan and do some work together? But no, she just thought, nah, everything's fine, let's just chit chat. Several times I've heard, I don't deal with that kind of trauma. And the classic, I don't do work around DID. Media portrayals of plurality. I mean, I don't even want to talk about the whole Sybil saga, which was like the only thing I had heard of. I think one reason so many media portrayals are so bad is that our whole culture tends to be very black and white and always wants to create monsters instead of actually dealing with the real issues. Once I realized that I was a system, I consumed massive amounts of plural media, which was incredibly helpful, and I really appreciate so many creators out there. But when my experience didn't match those that I was watching, for example, didn't know my system very well, or their names, or have a good grip on my own switching, or just being in a little bit older body, or having intense experience of different parts but not being able to put my finger on what's going on, or various other ways that I just didn't match what was on screen, then it might make me question myself or just feel shy or embarrassed to reach out and connect with other plurals. Systems or system members that aren't used to being in the real world or considered real. For many of us, many members of our system are so used to masking and so used to a job of being invisible, it can be very confusing. They're not used to being considered real in the real world. So much of what I'm trying to learn more about my system is in murky waters, or one part of us or system member remembers something but another one doesn't.
How do we counter all that? Here's some ideas and affirmations I like. We exist. We believe ourselves. We create safe spaces for ourselves and others. We tell the truth thoughtfully. We show and share ourselves in community. We are the experts and authorities on our own experiences.
There's so much that I don't know. I don't know what really happened in the place that I spent most of my early life. I don't know the size of my system and how many are more developed individuals and how many are fragments. The members that I do know, I don't know if they're standing in for several, and I don't know all of their memories. What I do know is that I am so proud of my system for making it to this point, for being here. And I know that I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to keep trusting my own experiences and what anyone and anything in my system has to say and what they might need. Speaking of discovery and being a relatively newly aware system, we thought this might be a good time to talk a little bit about making this video. Because to be totally honest, making this video kicked our ass. Not only were we massively naive about making a video, which we never did before, it was also incredibly hard for us as a traumagenic DID system. It felt so hard to be on camera so much and to assume that folks wanted to hear what we had to say. Our words just kept disappearing and turning mealy-mouthed. Part of what made it so hard and so incredibly wonderful. For the first time in our entire life, we were speaking to an audience of plurals and allies and peers, actually speaking and sharing as ourselves. All of a sudden, all of our parts recognized that we were speaking to a friendly audience. So many parts of my system came rushing to the front, wanting a chance to be heard. Not necessarily on camera, but piping up with thoughts and feelings about sharing or about our experiences. It's not made up. We would spend a long time getting set up and getting how we want to look, like temporary tattoos and stickers, because otherwise it's just way too boring. And then we would have a technical difficulty, and by the time we got that figured out, those parts were completely gone. Didn't make it into the talk. And whoever was there was not into the tattoos, the hair, the outfit, or the stickers. No. Don't know, don't care. One night, we went to bed with an awesome plan for the next day that we felt really good about, and then the parts and peeps that woke up the next morning were totally different, hadn't been around for a while, had a complete gray out over the video itself, as in, I can't find the feelings that I had about it before. And it is just so hard to do something when you don't feel any connection to it. All they wanted to do all day was to clean up the huge mess that was our apartment. Unintentional switching, amnesia of different kinds is real. In spite of all this, 3 really important things happened. One is we realized deep in our collective bones how much it meant to us, how important it was. And even though a bunch of us have so many perfectionism patterns, too bad, because it just was so important to find ways to share and connect. This skyrocketed our sense of acceptance and confidence that we are a system. We saw it. We could see it, we could feel it, we could hear it on and off camera. And not only that, because we had a lot of trouble speaking, we spent hours and hours editing video. And editing software shows the waveforms of the sound of the speech. We spent so many hours editing speech, we could actually recognize the different speech patterns of different peeps and parts that were on camera. We could see the differences right there in the waveforms. Third, and I think this is the most important, is that just like we have had a lot of upheaval since we realized that we are plural and that we have DID, it would be easy to say that making this video made the DID worse or made our life more chaotic. I think it's so important to have a healing and liberation perspective on that. You know, I saw a video the other day with someone on the autistic spectrum talking about how much harder they find it to mask since they were diagnosed with autism. I think during different periods of healing or getting to know and working with our system, it can seem more chaotic or harder or even less functional. But you know what? Screw ableism, because what matters to me is the healing, the liberation, being authentic, feeling more real, more alive, no matter what that looks like. I'm here for it. So, looking at what I do know, what I do remember, so many things start to fall into place and make sense. Things are easier to understand, and some of them are funny. So I wrote my own little list of you might be plural if. Now, these things aren't things that mean you are plural, but they're things that I find funny, realizing that I am plural.
You might be plural if... All true stories.
You might be plural if you legally changed your name, unrelated to marriage, twice. You might be plural if all your life when sharing photos with your friends, their main response is, "This is you?" You might be plural if you can tell the story of your life, just like any good book, movie, or video game. You might be plural if you stunned your friends, family, and coworkers with your awe-inspiring competence and your inability to fill in the blank with a basic life skill. You may be plural if years before hearing about it, you sometimes shout to yourself, "Come on, people, pull it together. We're trying to get out the door here." And it works. You may be plural if in your teenage angst meltdown, instead of shouting, "I hate you," or "I hate my life," you wailed, "I don't know who I am." Or when you're in your 50s and you say, "I just don't know who I am anymore." You're not having a midlife crisis. You're just trying to manage your day. You may be plural if your stuffed animals tend to take on complex personalities, needs, and interpersonal dynamics that feel strangely familiar. Or if your beloved pet and fur baby of 10 years, who you usually call Flurabelle, Flurry, Flurs, Flurby, Flurby Girl, or Flurby Derby Doo, suddenly just becomes the cat. You may be plural if, alone in your comfy home, you raise your head up from some intense journaling, look around your lovely room and say, "What are we doing living here?" Then leap up and take your usually introverted homebody self out to a park where all the people are to smile at them. Then you really want to go run a half marathon immediately. But you can't because you haven't really been running in 10 years. You may be plural if you can alternate between overpowering deep sobbing and making the grocery list, several times in 5 minutes. You may be plural if, when a polite coworker asks, "How are you?" you feel like they may as well ask you to distill the entire contents of Wikipedia into a 3-line haiku poem. Or if you're pretty familiar with the main fronters in your system until somebody asks, "Who's here right now?" and you go, "Look at that bird." Or after years of excellent healing work, you finally feel at peace with that one person or situation from the past. But a different voice pops up inside and goes, "The hell we are." You may be plural if one of you is a delicate flower who cannot tolerate cold or damp. But when the power goes out, another of you is thrilled that we must go out, tromp around in the sleet storm, in the dark, to recharge our phone in the car. You may be plural if you sometimes find yourself curiously wondering, why am I shouting, crying, giggling, cursing, speechless, stuttering, can't stop talking, or speaking in a surprising manner and thinking, I didn't know I could do this. You may be plural if, when you say, I miss my old self, you really, really mean it. You may be plural if by breakfast you have achieved the equivalent of the Paris Peace Accords, including diplomacy, alliances, concessions, and future commitments in order to pick your outfit, plan the day's priorities, or make it safely into the shower. You may be plural if you've always had an uncanny tendency to understand many sides of an issue, see multiple truths, and try to include everyone and every many. Lastly, you may be plural if you feel or think that you are. Realizing that I am a system, while I was in this heady mix of disorientation, validation, hopefulness, I, did a lot of research and I watched hundreds of videos. The one thing that resonated, that rang out to me and that I could hold on to was trying to be accepting and to reach for a friendly attitude towards being a system, towards my system, like just aim a friendly attitude in that direction, even if I don't understand it, even I don't know what my system really looks like. And literally in the moment that I did that, I had a feeling come into my body of warmth and being here, like more alive and more real. And on days when I too think I'm making all this up, this is crazy, this is too weird, or I made up that whatever, I remember that and I think this is right. Keep going and don't worry whether what's made up or not made up. This works.
I think of healing as something you experience and feel. When that changes beliefs, behaviors, and actions, that's liberation. When collective healing and liberation transforms the world, I call that revolution. All that takes a bit of magic, so I call it alchemy.
And to create alchemy, in my experience, we need to use some of our own intuition and imagination and meaning making. So I want to share some of the ways that I have done that. The first one I call Stuffed Animal Alchemy. Stuffed Animal Alchemy. I started working with a new healing collaborator, And Mary and I would create these three-dimensional scenes out of objects and things that she had to work with. And when I really looked at them, something magical happened. It just would kind of bypass my brainy intellect, and I would sort of feel it hit me energetically in a trauma healing sort of way. And Mary suggested that I get a stuffed animal or two. I thought this was awesome that somebody gave me a reason to go out and get a stuffed animal. Pretty soon, I had a whole bunch. I started to each morning kind of pile them all up, have them leaning into each other, and this kind of sweet puppy pile of connectedness, which I started to feel. It really started to affect me. So then we started using the stuffed animals. If we would have a session and I wouldn't really know what to work on, she would say, well, let's see what any of your stuffed animals have to say. One or another stuffed animal would just suggest itself to me and have something to say, or a mood or a need. And I just couldn't worry about, am I making this up? Because it was so effective and it just cut to the heart of things immediately. This was all before I knew that I was a system, and it was pure genius. We could do dialogues or create a scene or wrap up some stuffed animals or do healing work right on the stuffed animal's body, and I feel the effects. Here's me doing some stuffed animal alchemy on a day that I was having a lot of anxiety and compulsive behaviors. I wrapped up one of my little stuffed animals against me with a scarf, and it had a really amazing effect. My mind doesn't know that it's decades later. That part doesn't know, and it is getting something that it didn't get at the time. After discovery, and I knew that I was plural, I've been able to use them to work with parts of my system that I might not have access to at a given time. So Dale, a little deer stuffed animal, can stand in sometimes for kind of a young kid energy, and little Pinky, who is a little piggy, can stand in for yin child energy, and Smokey Bear, which is a little gray bear, can stand in for a caretaker. Sometimes I've just clumped together these three slots, kind of different types and ages, and seeing them all together helps me get a feeling for and imagine a system that is closely connected and cooperative and works together. That's been super helpful. And I can't close this section without a special shout out to Mr. Bixby,
A different little stuffed animal deer
who just seemed to take on so much personality. This kind of gentleman, butler, and bodyguard. And working on my book one time when I was so stuck, I just didn't know how to start writing again, I wrote a letter to Mr. Bixby and I poured my heart out. And Mr. Bixby gave me the most incredible, surprising advice that also really worked. Everyone is, quote, making it up. We all make up who we are to some extent based on what's inherent, our experiences, the discovery process, things that we find out in relation to each other's and the world. And I encourage us not to feel pressured by or invalidated by folks who think you can't be plural or be a system or have DID or whatever the case may be if it doesn't look like it may on YouTube or in the movies or a set cast of a Broadway musical. Those of us who have parts and peeps that don't know everything about themselves readily, need space and time for differentiation before we can have better communication and, understand also what we have in common and who we want to be, individually and collectively.
Alchemy of authenticity.
Our systems and system members might need time and loving attention to understand who they are. So, to use an example, around names, some parts and peeps in a system just come with names or know their names, and as soon as one part makes a connection with that person and that person wants them to know, then they know their name. For me, I'm often sort of murking about, and because my parts and peeps haven't gotten a lot of attention, so they haven't necessarily had the opportunity to be known by anyone or have much interactions. And a lot of times I'm trying out different names. I definitely have a feeling of what feels more right and less right. It's kind of like getting my eyes tested. More clear, less clear. More clear, less clear. I don't know if I totally have the right prescription yet, but I know I'm going in the right direction with good intentions. So am I making it up? It's a process. It's a process, and it's an important one. We also have, pretty sure, a lot of fragments. And so those fragments and wisps of memory, sensation, emotion that might be held by a part that didn't get a lot of time is why it's so important to actually have space for using our intuition and imagination to help parts and peeps to understand who they are and what it means to be alive. As many of you know, there is a widespread misinformation, ignorance, and fear that giving the space for attention, interaction, exploration, differentiation of a system's parts, peeps, members, headmates is somehow anti-therapeutic or anti-helpful, or is somehow in the way of that system achieving healing, health, liberation, functionality. I just feel so strongly from my own experience that could not be farther from the truth. The thing is, we learn what it means to be alive and how to be alive in relationship by interacting with other people, by mirroring, and by exploration, by trying things out and seeing what they feel like and what we like and don't like, and by reflection. When people say, oh, you're feeling sad, or wow, you love to learn, or you're frustrated right now, I wonder what helps you feel a bit calmer. Or, I've noticed that everyone else is really into reading these books, but you just want to go play in the mud. That is how we learn who we are as a being, and not only identity and personality development, but also skills and thinking about who we want to be in the world. It is absolutely critical that we give that attention, space, and opportunity to parts and peeps that need that to learn about life. And what does it mean to have this thought, emotion, experience, memory, identity, and to have a chance to grow in whatever way makes sense. For us, I don't think there is any part or member of our system that had anything close to enough safe space, time, reflection, and loving attention to learn about who they are or what it really means to be alive. And as different parts of our system stepped up or were created to handle more parts of our life, they didn't get that either. So for a therapist or any sort of clinical mental health worker to think or insist that they should only be speaking to one person, even if a system has a main person, core person, primary host, to withhold respect, acceptance, validity, interaction, and time to other parts or peeps in that system is just repeating the same neglect and lack of resources that was there in the first place. It's so wrong. I encourage us to try to not let ourselves feel invalidated or intimidated by or rushed by anybody who is for some reason not wanting or willing or able to give that attention. For me, each part and peep in my system desperately needs that opportunity for interaction and exploration and recognition, not only because, of course they do, because they are real, but also specifically in order to discover themselves and to develop and to learn. That's a process that I, as a system, am still engaged in, and there's no one part of me that can do that for the rest. We all need to be able to do that. Just like a young child learns to understand that they are a person, that differentiation is important in order to understand communication. And that is true as well of parts of a system. And so if we're learning this as we go along, we don't have every part that pops out fully formed, then we start thinking, I'm making this up. Or other people might be telling us, you're making it worse. And that's not what's going on. What's going on is growing and developing as a person, and that may happen in parts. And that is critical to even considering integration in one way or another, or functional multiplicity, isn't really possible if parts and peeps don't understand themselves and understand each other.
Soon after I aimed that friendly attitude toward my system, I felt compelled to draw this image. A simple line sketch of a smiling young man holding hands with a beaming little kid, with the names Ben and Sophie, which is interesting because Sophie is my name now, but it wasn't when I was little. And then I remembered or was able to feel the joy of that beaming little Sophie. Recently, Ben revealed hundreds of babies to be cared for in the magic cabin, which in turn seems to be helping one of my physical health conditions. Another time early on, a system peep surprisingly was still up front when the time for our healing session rolled around, with the vibe of this cartoon birdie nature dude screenshot from the self-care app Finch. They had a hard time speaking at all, which was definitely new, but my healing collaborator Mary didn't miss a beat. She told us it was okay. We texted with her most of the session and discovered this cis member's different attitudes toward our dad, our town, and our shoes. Right after that, a handful of memories from high school flooded in. Just ordinary ones, but for a brief time, we felt as if we had been there, and it felt amazing to feel connected.
My cat's got the kitty crazies. There's a saying in community organizing, change moves at the speed of trust. This is alchemy moves at the speed of safety, and Mr. Bixby is here to help. Alchemy at the speed of safety. Safety is what makes the exploration, discovery, growth, and healing possible. Part of safety is very concrete, tangible, and practical, and part is what we create. 3 kinds of safety came to my mind. And I'm sure you all will think of tons more. One is pretty basic, safe people and places. Even with all the safety of the audience and the intention, I had a huge amount of trouble trying to feel safe enough to do this talk at all. I needed to map out and visualize my safety before I could even move forward. This is a drawing that was strictly for my own process, but to use it as an example, it's a hand-drawn sketch of a little bird with its wings outstretched, Iridescent Birdie, inside a circle with 2 more rings outside of that, with a bunch of little symbols and notes. The cool thing about this is that a lot of different parts and members of my system can contribute in their own way. Mr. Bixby is on one of the wings. Sonia drew in symbols for being grounded through the root and crown chakras. On the tail it says, "Littles are awesome." Some parts of my system respond on different levels to symbols or simple idea like the chirp, chirp, chirp coming out of the bird, whereas others of us think things like leading through vulnerability and conviction. We can just put it all on here. The inner boundary is an energetic boundary of safety. The ring outside that circle is the TPA community and a few people that I trust. And then the ring outside of that was just this possibility of people seeing the talk that might not be totally safe. So I've got Jake in that ring because he has got more than enough attitude to handle that. And it's not showing here, but I had to write down specifically people that I wouldn't be sharing the talk with and what would need to happen before I showed it to them. Another kind of safety that I was thinking of is energy safety. Another thing people think is not real, but to me it's very specific, tangible, predictable, and real. My training in energy medicine is very nuts and boltsy, so I've learned lots of ways to shift, change, support, and protect my energy systems. Another safety boundary for me is simply not rushing. The overall nature of me as a system and as an energetic rhythm is slower. Not rushing is super important to me feeling safe. With that in mind, I'd like to take time to mention one of my favorite books, Frederick by Leo Leone. It's a very liberation-oriented book, especially around ableism. It's about this little mouse who lives in a mouse family who all starts working super, super hard as end of summer comes along to store up their supplies for the winter, and they're all carrying nuts and corn and working hard, and Frederick is not in that way. They ask him what he's up to, and he says he's storing up the warmth and colors and the words. As winter progresses, they eventually start to run out of their food and chit-chat. They ask Frederick about what he stored up, and he totally entrances them with his words that make them feel warmer and see beautiful colors because Frederick is a poet. I have always loved this illustration. Some people's systems look like this. And it was just so magical how Frederick was able to change the way they all felt and make them feel warmer and see beautiful visions and feel more hopeful for spring. That is alchemy. I also wanted to share one of the most powerful things I have ever done for my own healing, and it's something that I totally made up, which is a magic cabin that I made a part of my inner world, much of which is very murky. But when I realized that I could create something like this, it was totally game-changing. I like designing things, so I started designing this magic cabin as a place where I could go in my mind that would feel really safe, that I could use to connect with my system. Just a line drawing of a octagon building. Looks a bit geometric, and it's divided up inside into many different rooms and spaces. The cabin sits in the 4 elements of fire to the east of the sunrise. There's water to the north and the northeast, and there's air to the west and mountains, and earth to the south and forest. Also outside the magic cabin, there's flower gardens, patio, kitchen gardens, forest gardens. The fact that it's a magic cabin has been priceless in that it's not very visible from the outside unless you know what you're looking for. So it just feels uber safe. The inside has all kinds of different spaces that are helpful in different ways. Food and cooking is a huge way we feel safe in our outer life. So there's a beautiful kitchen and dining space, arts and crafts room with space for littles can get really messy. There's also a littles loud room for just making noise, and a littles book corner in the cozy library, and a reading room. Then I added a magical tree of life in the center of the whole cabin. I was able to check in with members of my system and see what they wanted to see. There's a couple members of my system that I know of from dreams, and they live in a secret little pink house a ways away from the cabin because they don't feel comfortable enough to live in the cabin the way some people do. But they have secret tunnels underground that they can use to visit the nursery and go anywhere. Another one leads to an underground kiva or temple, and they can follow that trail into the Truth and Rescue room or the big favorite, the Kitty Cat Lounge. I checked in with another member of the system, and they said, yeah, the cabin's cool, but I want like a wood shop and a makerspace and trails. So we added that, and then we recently added a beautiful swimming space and sauna. Someone was looking for comfort and safety, and that's what they needed, so we added it. We often think of the magic cabin or go there in our minds when we're feeling uncomfortable and we're trying to communicate or help out various members of the system. And we will just kind of poke around the cabin till we find something that works. And I have made contact with little wisps of memories and members. For example, one of the times that we were feeling really bad and roaming from space to space, we came across a rare memory and showing of a small person with skinny little arms was the main feature, and they were wearing a very, very heavy, burdensome backpack, and whoever was there wanted to take the backpack, but the kid with skinny arms didn't feel safe to let it go. But we were able to find a spot to sit down on the floor so the backpack could rest on the floor and just sit next to the little kid. That act alone brought relief, and we took them to one place we thought might help, but it didn't. But then we were able to go to the kitty cat lounge, and that was an incredible experience and just brought so much relief to a child part that really needed it. I'm sure you all have many other ways that you think about safety. I can't wait to learn more about them. I want to give a shout out to Turtle System, who really helped me one day that I was having, the opposite of self-acceptance. I just felt ashamed, really, and these horrible feelings of why don't I know, and Turtle System had this beautiful wisdom and sincerity of saying to me, trust your system. The system is there for a reason. Turtle's acceptance of my pace and where my system was at was just priceless. Community alchemy, which we are doing and creating right now, can heal and empower us in ways that we can't even imagine. Community alchemy. My system has been striving for community alchemy and a better world our whole life, including organizing around divestment from apartheid South Africa, very visible queer liberation work in the late 1980s, helping form a local political party based on ecofeminism and economic democracy, undoing racism work across organizations, campuses, communities, a women's peace encampment, challenging militarism and hierarchy that regularly trespass into nuclear weapons facilities. 5 years training peer educators on community building across race, class, gender, religion, culture, age, ability, disability. Catholic workers who were doing a huge diet, standing up for poor people, and the pagan cluster doing a spiral dance in front of the police and stopping traffic with beautiful instant gardens. We did about 20 years of a kind of peer listening practice, and it's probably the reason why I'm still here. To listen to and validate each other and just hang around people who have similar identities and experiences is powerfully healing and liberating. And at the same time, community has to be based on shared values about how we treat each other and what's important. Each liberation movement is everyone's liberation movement. Plurals include such a vast diversity, which is a wonderful way to learn from each other and connect. We all have a role in community building, and it doesn't have to be the same thing. Alchemy is not always flashy. I spent many years organizing around transportation, and because of a lot of boring ass work that we did and put in place, a child that lived with a family with very little means of transportation who wanted desperately to be in the school musical got to do that, and it took 6 different people to work together to come up with a crazy plan. And some of her family and teachers weren't that supportive because she was already really struggling in school. But they came up with a plan involving one school bus, a public bus, and then another school bus, and then a carpool to get her to rehearsals. But even with that hour or two of transportation and rehearsals 5 days a week, her grades went up. And the next year, she entered a new school and won the lead in their production. And the point is not that she became a successful performer. It's that people listening to her and believing in her and just helping out. I have no doubt that changed the trajectory of her entire life, and you have no idea of the possible ripple effect. We wanted to add that we think just acknowledging littles in our systems and honoring the care and feeding of littles is itself totally revolutionary and could change the world. So don't underestimate your role listening to someone or sharing your own experience. Any of you out there who hearted one of my posts, you have absolutely done more than you know.
This stick figure line drawing is me trapped in the dominant culture's frenzied, individualistic, toxic positivity, self-help grasping for a standard idea of success and paradise. I'm hunched over, carrying a huge burden, ungrounded, relying only on my brain and effort. I'm exhausted but bored, anxious, self-critical. I have compare despair, and even though I drew this pre-discovery, I'm wearing a mask. This one is my dream of community, where I'm standing up, opened up, smiling, grounded, holding hands with others, and compassionate towards cloudy emotions that come and go. Life is colorful, I can be myself, and the fake paradise is just in a little bubble where it says, "Oh, who cares?" For community alchemy, we've got to imagine and create something better than what we've known. In other words, make it up.
I'm glad you were here because we really need each other, and we need to see and be heard. And the world needs us to be seen and be heard.